K the boss, 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 K the boss. K the boss, K the boss, K the K the boss, K the boss, K the boss. K the boss, K the boss, K the K the boss, K the boss, K the boss. K the boss, K the boss, K the boss. K the boss, K the boss, K the boss, K the boss, K the boss.
All right. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? What's happening? Can y'all hear me all right? Let me do a quick sound check.
Ladies and gentlemen.
All right, we are sounding good. Got a little bit of a runny nose. We got this Arctic freeze coming through, and it's about to be cold, man. Winter came late this year, but man, did she sure show up, man? Geez, Louise. But anyway, what's happening, ladies and gentlemen? So tonight's show is it's going to be a bit of an overview of what's been taking place, but the last show, I believe it was the last show that I titled "At Home and Abroad." Let me look it up. No, that was the Hidden Agenda. No, All Enemies, Foreign and Domestic. That was 4 shows ago, and this ties into the At Home and Abroad that was mentioned in the Q Clearance Patriot post made by Q Plus, who we now know to be Donald Trump himself. So he was letting us know what was about to happen, and we're right back in that cycle again with the mass protests, the chaos in the streets, the media blitz, this big debate over whether what Donald Trump is doing with ICE is right or wrong. And a lot of the facts are being left out of the story. So hence, that's why I'm here to give you guys those facts and those bits of information that may potentially change your opinion on certain things. Now, the whole debate about ICE, it's not even really supposed to be a debate, and it never was until Donald Trump decided to start using ICE. Um, but that is for, again, a more sinister purpose, which was discussed on the last show last night with me and B Miles. And what's happening overseas is Trump's going around making all these peace deals now, and he just started the Board of Peace. I don't know if you guys heard about that, but that's the next big talk. But at home here in America, we you guys should know ICE has started doing raids over in Maine, and the same type of fraud at the state level with the Somalis was going on in Maine that's going on in Minnesota. You see, these certain places are getting highlighted because this is where it's the worst at, but it's also the indicator to let us know what things are like in other districts in other states, mostly Democratic states, because they're the ones working hand in hand with these foreign invaders and these foreign infiltrators. And the Republican and Conservative Party, they're the ones trying to get these people out of the country, while the Democrats are fighting for them to stay. And not only fighting for them to stay, but passing legislation in their states to give them massive amounts of funding. Well, now we know where that funding is actually going. It's going into these fraud schemes where these politicians get kickbacks. So what we're going to see in the near future, in the when the mass arrests actually start happening, which they're probably happening already while the ICE raids are going on, who knows, right? But what we're going to see is the civilian players involved who are non-governmental being charged with all kinds of fraud, and the individuals in government who are supposed to be providing oversight and enforcing the laws that prevent this type of fraud but are benefiting from the fraud, so they turn a blind eye to it. They'll be charged with crimes like bribery, and it's going to be to such a high degree that these people will get years in prison. So don't get your panties all in a bunch and don't get all overexcited and "Hey, why are they still walking around? Why aren't they going to jail?" It's a process, and the process has to involve removing every operative on every level in every layer, because if it's not a clean sweep and individuals from these networks remain, that means the capability for them to start over and start, committing their crimes again still exists. So everybody has to go. And this is the way it has to be done. And the ICE raids in Maine, they're targeting again the criminal aliens at the top of their priority list and whoever else that they can find in the meantime. Now there's this big debate about whether ICE can enter your house, because the anti-ICE protesters who were impeding ICE, and they're no longer doing so much of that because they've been getting arrested and charged with impeding. They've stopped doing that. Now what they're doing is they're filming the ICE agents, which, by all under normal circumstances, there would be nothing wrong with that, nothing illegal about that. But what these people don't understand, and what most people in the general public don't know, which is what we've been talking about a lot here, is ICE is going after organized criminal networks, mainly these terror cells. And because their mission is I guess, an anti-terrorism mission, anybody that's aiding and abetting these terrorists in any way get lumped in with them. And now Homeland Security is declaring these anti-ICE protesters domestic terrorists. And it sounds harsh and it sounds authoritarian, but these are the people that need to be restrained. You see? And that's the sad thing about it is, as Americans, hang on a second. Anyway, as I was saying, as Americans, the last thing we want to see is heavy-handed police enforcement. But unfortunately, too many of us have fallen for the mainstream media narrative, which has been preaching for the last 10 years to obstruct the Trump administration in anything that he does. And now we have a situation where their obstruction is facilitating the protection. It's basically offering protection to criminal organizations made up and led by foreign nationals who actually pose a real and imminent threat to the American people. So we're in a pretty unique situation right now where the terrorism threat actually is real, unlike in past administrations where, oh, there's a terrorist here, there's a terrorist there. Oh, now we got to take your rights. Now we got to scan your nuts at the airport, shit like that. But this time, there is a real threat that's not government orchestrated within itself, but it has been facilitated by our government in the past administration with the open borders. Now, the Board of Peace is something that seems totally unrelated to what's going on here in America, but the two go hand in hand because the Board of Peace is going to be a group of nations that will share similar goals and have good trade relationships. And this Board of Peace will be like a competing body to the United Nations. Remember, Trump just pulled the U.S. out of 65 different international organizations tied to the UN. Some are saying it's 66 now. But that's a big shift. And not only has he done that, but now he's started his own international organization and has gotten the cooperation of 26 world leaders so far. And there's been several more who have been invited to the table. And what these nations are going to do is they are going to implement policies that are in line with their founding documents and their constitutions. They're going to uphold the rights of the people. They're going to get rid of the Rothschild banking system and go back to a precious metals backed currency. They're going to join in with the quantum financial system, and America is going to lead the charge on that. And oddly enough, of the 26 countries that are in the Board of Peace, Israel is also included, even though they just got done committing a genocide. So one's probably scratching their head saying, well, why would Israel be on the Board of Peace when they're a bunch of genocidal maniacs and the whole world knows this? Well, here's why. Because if Trump was to, again, abandon Israel right now at this current moment, they would go on high alert and they would activate their operatives here domestically to start launching attacks on the American people. That's number one. And number two, they're going to go haywire and start nuking everybody because then they'll know that it's game over. So in other words, they'll put their guard up so high that they'll become aggressive and start attacking everybody. So they'll start nuking all the Middle Eastern countries around. They'll start turning up over here with the sleeper cells in the streets, and shit's going to get ugly really fast. So in order to maintain the world peace, you include them in your Board of Peace. But once they're a part of your Board of Peace and they sign all the contracts, now they're beholden to the whims of the chairman of the Board of Peace, who happens to be Donald Trump. So Donald Trump essentially just took over the world with the Board of Peace thing. And let's say my theory is correct and Iran does go ahead and commence the nuking of Israel, the destruction of Israel. If Israel is on the Board of Peace and the Board of Peace decides, because most of the nations on the Board of Peace are nations where leaders were calling out the genocide in Israel, wouldn't you know? And if the Board of Peace has a vote and they say, are we going to help Israel? And the Board of Peace says, no, they brought it on themselves and everybody votes no. Guess what? Israel gets no support and the rest of the world is behind it. So now if they decide they want to turn up over here in America, now they have to think about all our allies, military and economic allies on the Board of Peace, turning against them, rounding up their people in their countries and completely removing their international infiltration overnight. So Israel's having a leash put on them right now. And They're being brought into this organization that's going to severely limit their powers. You see, a lot of people don't really understand how this diplomatic shit works because they don't understand the terror threats that are uh that go hand in hand with these diplomatic agreements. Every country has infiltrated the other country, and every country has operatives and killers in that country who are ready to go once the order is given. You think the U.S. military had just arrived in Venezuela for the first time the night they grabbed Maduro? The CIA was already there. And who do you think deployed the sonic weapon? That was the CIA that deployed that. Excuse me, that sonic weapon. Is it not the CIA who has the history of using these experimental and unorthodox weapons? Wasn't it the CIA that started using the heart attack gun back in the 80s or the 90s or however long ago that was? It was a dart gun that shot an ice dart. And the ice dart would contain a toxin that would induce a heart attack. And once you get shot with this dart, it's so tiny that it doesn't leave a mark on your skin, or at least not a noticeable one. And then the liquid in the ice melts and dissolves into your bloodstream, causes a heart attack. And from all examinations, it looks like you just died from a heart attack. Ain't that something? This is the CIA. This is what they do. But because Donald Trump is the commander in chief and CIA is DOD, Department of Defense, and the commander in chief is the supreme leader of the Department of Defense, now they are bound to Donald Trump's orders. That's how the game works. That's how the game goes. Whoever holds the position holds the power. This is why the controllers of the world always insist on putting puppets in those positions of power. Because those positions of power come with real military force. You have full control of the nation's military, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful military in the world. Sorry, y'all. I just had to sneeze. Now I got to blow my nose. Hang on a second. Now, where the Board of Peace and the domestic operations with ICE come in here at where they tie together, in all of these nations, they are basically uprooting and ousting the foreign infiltration. What's happening in Russia with Putin and the Rothschilds, it's being mirrored in other countries. We're just not hearing about it, but Burkina Faso was one of the first countries to get rid of their foreign infiltration and return the power of the government back to the people, with Captain Traoré becoming the leader of that country. And he's been doing great things for his nation, and the people love him, and he's making a good impact around the world. Donald Trump has not really said much, but he has met with Traoré before, and they seem to have a pretty cordial, amicable working agreement. But there's been some talk in the news lately about some antagonistic posturing against each other. But this is all for the cameras. This is all for show. Just like we've been hearing about Trump, America and Russia going to war forever, and Trump and Putin going to war and competing with each other when they're actually working together. The only difference is, because of the demographics here in the United States, the process has to be done a little differently. Things are going to take a little longer because there's so many different layers, and there's so many people within the general population that have been brainwashed that without the full consent and support of the people, everything has to be done by the book. Because according to the Constitution and the book, if the people say this is the way we want it, that's the way it should be. And there's half the country saying, get all these illegals the fuck out. And there's another half of the country saying, leave our neighbors alone. And that's where the problem comes in. There's too much resistance within the government. Now, in Russia, they were able to get rid of their foreign infiltration. They never had a problem with open borders or none of that bullshit because their population is not as brainwashed as the American people. Thus, the representatives serving in government who are tasked with making these decisions were able to make those decisions practically overnight without any pushback because they had the full support and consent of the people. This is why the mainstream media has to lie about Donald Trump and demonize Donald Trump so much, because if people actually knew who Donald Trump was really was as a person and what he was really about as a president and what he actually has done for not only America but the world, he would have the full support and consent of the people. But because the media understands that the people have to be opposed to him in order to maintain the oppositional representation in government, they're going to continue to lie. They're going to continue to push these false narratives. They're going to continue to make up shit. They're going to continue to demonize Trump and demonize his supporters. And by any means necessary, even if it means getting a bunch of black people out in the street and gunning them down to say ICE did it, they will go that far. Because they've been losing control of the narrative and they've been losing the support of the people. Because it's now been admitted that in Minnesota, a lot of these anti-ICE protesters are not even from there. When the local people in Minnesota, they have no problem with the ICE agents doing their thing. But it's these out-of-state agitators that are coming into the city and causing a ruckus, and they're being supported by the leadership. So the people of Minnesota are literally being betrayed by their own leadership, by their own elected leaders. And I think they're starting to see that because it's the same shit they did in all those cities with the George Floyd riots. And it's funny because all the cities with the ICE protests, the exact same George Floyd cities. Go look at the map, superimpose them over each other, look at side by sides, whatever you got to do. But they're the exact same cities because these are the exact same networks, just a new wave of operatives. It's organized, it's coordinated, and they're working with foreign interests. Thus, in a state of declared war, when we just had an invasion of foreign nationals, everything must go. The foreign nationals have to be removed from the country, and the domestic collaborators have to be brought to justice. And that's what this mission is all about, because we got to clean up the whole system. This is the final draining of the swamp. And how do you effectively drain the swamp and get everything down the drain? You kind of got to stir it up a little bit because all that crud's been there so long, it's been settled. So in some spots, it even looks like it's the bottom of the swamp because there's so many layers of mud and algae and shit built up on it that you can't tell that there's crud under there, there's garbage under there. So you got to stir that shit up to see what's really in there. Then you pull the plug. And in all of these other nations that have been invited to join the Board of Peace and that are members of the Board of Peace, except for a few, of course, Israel being one of them, they have elected governments in those nations that oppose the Rothschild banking system. They oppose the Federal Reserve System. They are favorable to the BRICS. In fact, many of them are BRICS members, and they are switching to a gold-backed currency. And they're getting rid of their immigration problem. They're locking up their corrupt politicians. And they're doing all the things that Trump's trying to do here in America. Only difference is Trump has a different kind of fight. Because those countries didn't have the open borders like we did. Now, before we get rolling, don't forget, guys, go follow me over on Rumble. Follow me on Rumble in case they zap my channel over here on YouTube. Rumble is where you'll find me. All right. I got a bunch of videos on there that you haven't seen before because they're not allowed on YouTube. You'll find them on Rumble. You can watch them for absolutely free. There is no paywall. Oh, shit. At home and abroad is tonight's topic. I'm tripping. I just saw the notification. Jeez Louise. It's cold. My brain's frozen. Also, guys, go subscribe to the Citizen Man backup channel because, again, if they zap me over here on Citizen Man TV, The backup channel is where I can broadcast the message and direct you guys to where to go. But Rumble would be the place, the number one place to find me. Okay. But subscribe to the backup channel because I want to keep the backup channel alive and active. Also, if you guys feel so inclined to support the show, you could do so by sending in a kind donation via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo by using the tag scrolling across the screen in the banner below, the links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat. In the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow, just click the yellow, the box opens up, and all the links are there. And you can also find those links in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. And now the red X that you see through the PayPal logo, don't let that deter you. The PayPal link is active. That red X is just to remind people that PayPal censors comments and they will try to freeze your account and steal your money if you say something that they don't like. So I strongly suggest that you keep it surface level so they'll never have an excuse to mess with your money. They're in on it too. Yes, they are. All right. And big shout out to my good brother Lee14224 for that faithful support on the PayPal. Shout out to you, my brother. We got one supporter for the night so far. Let's see how many we can get because last night was Wednesday night was not good. So guess what, guys? Hold on a second. So guess what? I was just clicking around earlier tonight, and I discovered that in this gallery, the one that organizes my slides that I said I couldn't zoom in on because I have to use, because it just didn't have that feature and I have to use the big gallery. Well, guess what? I figured out how to zoom it, y'all. How's about that? How's about it? Yeah, so we in business now. Uh-huh. Yeah, we in business now. So this guy here, this is the Pfizer CEO, and he's been voicing some very urgent concerns pertaining to people not taking vaccines anymore because, well, that's what his company thrives off of, people taking vaccines. And thanks to RFK Jr.'s position as the Human Health Services Secretary, he's been cutting down on the vaccine schedule and basically changing things within the system to make it to where less and less people are taking these vaccines now. And this is what the Pfizer CEO had to say. Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla has a public meltdown at the World Economic Forum over growing numbers of people refusing vaccines, calling it a new religion. Well, here's the thing. It's actually people coming out of a religion because the people who believed in the vaccines, that was the religion because they had blind faith that the vaccines were safe and effective, and they had blind faith in the very people that were lying to them and preying on them. And after this whole debacle with the COVID vaccine, where more people died than the actual disease it was meant to prevent, well, people don't trust you anymore. You've lost the trust and faith of the people. And we have, again, an administration running our government who is on board with what the people want. And so things are changing within the system that benefit the people. So Albert Bourla says he's deeply concerned and frustrated, blasting what he describes as a religion-driven anti-science rhetoric. Well, it's not anti-science, it's just anti-you and your lying stooges. That's what it is, because the shit, putting mercury in a vaccine and telling us it's safe and effective is not science. And people who believe that it's safe and effective because your doctors and your scientists said it, they're the religious believers because they're the ones operating on blind faith, whereas the anti-vax people are operating in facts and logic. Logic is, my kid was fine before he got those vaccines, and now he's fucking retarded after he got those vaccines. So guess what? No more vaccines. That's called logic. That's not religion. Religion is seeing people get damaged by these vaccines, convincing yourself that it's not the vaccine, and listening to some stranger tell you the vaccine is safe and effective. That is religious following. That is religious belief. You see how they twist everything around and make it backwards, make what it's supposed to mean the opposite? Bourla claims the only solution is to immediately replace RFK Jr. So he's making it clear that RFK Jr. is the guy disrupting their biological weapons program. And some vaccine company CEO is trying to tell the American president who he should have in his administration. You see? Now, if Trump was really bought and paid for, and these vaccine companies had the power that we're made to believe that they have, or that they have had in prior years when the vaccine industry was booming, Albert Bourla would not be making public statements like this. If he saw a problem pop up where people weren't taking vaccines anymore, the seat change would happen immediately. The new puppet would be installed, and it'd be back to business as usual. But that hasn't happened because something changed within the system. And what changed within the system was the commander in chief and his power to choose appointees to run these agencies. And the appointees that he chose happened to be people that align with what the American people have always known and have always been saying. These are people who actually believe in truth, and they're not there to just sell an agenda. And now we're seeing the results of that political change, because the big corporations that once had a stranglehold over our government, thus giving them a stranglehold over our pockets and our insurance money, they don't have that stranglehold anymore. So this is major. When you see a CEO complaining that he's losing business because of somebody in government, that means that person in government is doing the will of the people. And why do you think the whole system, the whole establishment is against Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump is executing the will of the people. This is the system that we as people have known had been rigged against us our entire lives. Now we're seeing this whole system tell us who our leaders should be. That should give you pause. That should give you some real pause. So you mean to tell me this Pfizer CEO, this bastard that killed my great-grandmother and killed my grandmother and killed my uncles and them with his clot shot, is telling us who should be in charge of our healthcare system? That's what you're telling me? See how ridiculous that is? But you see, the people that believe in this system, the people that are pro-vaccination because they believe the quote-unquote science and all that shit, they are the religious followers. And the establishment knows it. But they have to portray them as the intellectual superiors and the ones that got it right, and the people who tell the truth as the ones that are getting it wrong, because they don't want people, because if people start listening to us, their system collapses. They lose the consent of the people. Sorry about that. I had to blow my nose again. And I don't know if you guys heard, but Trump just went to Davos recently. And at Davos, he gave the speech. And CNN actually covered Trump's Davos speech, and they wrote an article about it. And the headline, I don't know if I have it here. Yes, I do have it here. It's slide 20. So let's jump to slide 20 real quick. This is what CNN had to say. 5 takeaways from Trump's antagonistic speech in Davos. So wait a minute. So Trump went to the meeting of the world elites that are basically trying to kill us off and poison everybody with their bad medicine and sell us propaganda and install foreign puppets as our representatives in Congress so they can continue pushing their one world government agenda. And at this meeting, Trump gave an antagonistic speech. And you know what's funny? After I saw this headline, it prompted me to actually go watch the speech. It's about an hour and 10 minutes or 12 minutes long. And in that speech, he cooked everybody. He told them how fucked up their country was because of bad politicians and bad policies, and how great America was doing because of our great policies and, you know, good people in government. And boy, they hated it. They hated it. And it was at that same Davos meeting where that Pfizer CEO was complaining about people not taking the vaccine. So Trump went up there and cooked their ass. And that's why, of course, the establishment news has to report it as antagonistic. So Trump is being antagonistic to the elites, as he's always been, and as they've been to him, because they're mad that he won't get on their program and destroy his country. You see? Now, I wanted to show you guys this. I couldn't help myself. The flat earther in me just couldn't, I couldn't help it. This is a picture of Devil's Tower. I believe it's in Arizona. Correct me if I'm wrong. And mainstream science, you know, the same ones that told us vaccines are safe and effective and that Earth is round. Yeah, those guys. They also tell us that Devil's Tower was the result of a volcanic formation just out in the middle of nowhere, where I don't think there are any volcanoes, or at least known to be any volcanoes. And they claimed that the magma came up out of the ground and formed this magnificent structure that they now call the Wyoming. Thank you, Jaden Stewart. Wyoming. I was way off. Arizona. It's too green to be Arizona. Duh. But anyway, they claim that this is a volcanic structure. A result of the structure is a result of volcanic activity. And others, quote unquote, conspiracy theorists say that this is the remains of an ancient tree. And there's many other plateaus like this around the world that appear to be the remains of ancient trees. And wouldn't you know it? Some outdoorsy person just so happened to be out there one day as a storm was rolling in, and the clouds were kind of hanging over Devil's Tower. And if you look at it, does it not look like a tree? It's almost like there's this big question on Earth, like, what is this structure? Is it an ancient tree, or is it what they tell us it is, and this and that? And then the Most High just formulated the clouds right over it to show us what it is. The same way the Most High created the earth to show us what it is. All will be revealed. And I think this picture right here is a huge revelation, because it really does look like a tree. But anyway, let's get back to business. The Atlantic, one of those left-wing garbage newspapers that serve no purpose other than an alternative, a less pliable alternative to toilet paper. And they say Trump can prosecute anyone now. The Department of Justice is his personal law firm. And they wrote this article as a huge hit piece against Trump by Adam Serwer, whatever the hell his name is. And they try to make it, sound as if like Trump is just using the power of the presidency to go after his political enemies. And this is exactly what I told you they were going to try to do, right? But this whole title is disingenuous, especially the subtitle, because the Department of Justice is every president's law firm. And it can't possibly be his personal law firm because they serve under him in a professional capacity. And saying Trump can prosecute anyone now, of course, it implies as if it's a bad thing, when in reality, it's exactly what the American people have been needing, because past presidents who had the power to prosecute anyone, the someones who should have been prosecuted were actually protected. You don't believe me? Here's one example. Former DEA agent sentenced to 5 years in prison for using badge to protect drug trafficking friends. And they were also government agents that used their positions of power to protect pedophiles and protect human traffickers and other individuals. And this guy had served for 11 years from 2008 to 2019. And in 2019, he retired and got arrested. Who was president in 2008? So he came in under Obama, served all the way to 2019. That means he served both terms of Obama and almost the entirety of Trump, 3 years into Trump's first term. And then he got busted because when Trump came in, Trump started draining the swamp. And there was a lot of these low-level guys that got busted and went to jail that we don't hear about. And this guy was aiding and abetting drug traffickers throughout his entire career under Obama. Remember, Obama was running guns to Mexico, Operation Fast and Furious. All of these deep state presidents were involved in this criminal activity. That's why they were so willing to go to war in the Middle East, but not do shit about the Mexican cartels. Because they were involved in it. They were getting paid from it. You see? Virginia Democrats introduced bill to end mandatory minimum sentences for rape, manslaughter, and child pornography. And this is your Democrats at work. They want to do everything antithetical to what a normal human being would expect from their government because they want to turn the country upside down. They want to undo the Constitution. They want to give free rein to the perverts and the criminals because they too are perverts and criminals. So they're essentially trying to give free rein to themselves. And they're doing this because their puppet masters are paying them to do this. They're all on the payroll. The Somalis who stole Nick Sorter's camera reportedly have an address as a children's autism center in Minnesota. Truth is much stranger than fiction. Make these people famous. So Nick Sorter was one of the reporters going to Minnesota investigating these Somalis and their scams, apparently. And these two Somalis stole his camera. And now it turns out that, well, it seems like they may have had a reason to do that because they too own a scam healthcare center that was collecting government money, federal money by way of the state, and not providing the services that they were being paid by the government to provide. So how you like that? Also, we did talk about the Somalis shipping the cash out of the United States, right? The scam money that they were able to accumulate in cash. Once the heat started coming down on them, the TPS status was revoked and the ICE raids began. For the last 2 years, they started shipping the cash out of the country in suitcases right through the airport in Minneapolis. Hang on a second. And again, once the Trump administration initiated the protocols to round these people up essentially and remove them from the country, the cash started getting stopped. And here's a slide showing a Somali migrant caught at Minneapolis airport smuggling $800,000 in stolen welfare cash. $800,000 seized at Minneapolis airport. At MSP, your tax dollars headed to Dubai, and then from Dubai, it was going to be forwarded on to Somalia. But I want to show you guys something. You see those $100 bills in there? What do you notice about those $100 bills? I'll wait. That's right, the one dud. Man, I love my audience. I love my audience. You guys are fucking brilliant. They're old $100 bills. That means this is cash that they had been stacking for a long, long time. Lies That Bind on Rumble says, I'm wondering who took the photo. Well, it had to be one of the TSA agents or maybe an ICE agent or a federal agent, but it was published in a public report. So it's not like a leaked photo or nothing. But yeah, these are old $100 bills because this is cash they had been stacking. They probably got warehouses full of cash. that they've been stacking for years. Lies That Bind says the $100 bills are extra long. Yeah, they do look like they're stacked a little weird. But it could be that the bands are in the middle and then the bill. I don't know. That does look a little strange. But yes, these old hundreds is the stash money they've been stashing, and this is the money they've been using to bribe the Democrats with and shit and send back to Somalia for Al-Shabaab. Mind you, and you know what the sad thing is? They got people starving in Somalia, and these Somalians over here robbing the American people and then sending the money back to the very terrorist organization that's starving the people in Somalia. Ain't that some shit? When they could actually be using, because you know what, I wouldn't have been so mad if they were sending the money back home and we started seeing out of nowhere Somalia starts developing and they got farms and kids are getting fat and everybody's living good and there's infrastructure and an intact government, and then we find out that they were scamming American dollars and sending it to Somalia. I wouldn't be so mad because I would say, you know what, at least they did it for a noble cause. But when they're doing it just to keep keep warehouses full of cash and keep their own people oppressed, like, yeah, lock their asses up. Get them the fuck out of here. These people are trash. You know? Like, it's one thing if you steal to feed the poor, but it's another thing if you steal to finance the people who are keeping the poor poor. You know what I'm saying? That's a whole different level of evil right there. And these anti-ICE protesters, they are so damn brainwashed that, again, they don't realize the danger that they're putting themselves and their fellow Americans in when they defend these illegal aliens, because they have no idea who they're defending. An illegal migrant from Mexico who Biden allowed to enter our country broke into a home and raped an 11-year-old girl at knife point in front of her 10-year-old sister. Police say he did it because he found the young girl attractive. When you see liberals protesting ICE, this is who they're defending. Yeah, and they don't even know it. They don't even know it. They think they're defending their poor, innocent neighbors. And when I tell you, these people will harm you, they will harm you. Even you liberals, you think when he was in there doing that to that little girl, you think he gave a fuck that if she was a Democrat or not? You think he gave a fuck if her parents voted for Biden or not? These people don't care about you. Now, speaking of the ICE protests, they ran up in the church last Sunday, and now there have been arrests, right? But this is where it gets interesting. So this black lady was one of the organizers of that so-called quote-unquote protest. I call it a riot. She got arrested. This lady, this fat lady, is another organizer, the fat lady with the brown teeth. She got arrested too. And the dusty guy that smells like a foot, that's half man, half mushroom, he also got arrested. And later today, after I had gathered these slides, it had been reported that a couple other people had been arrested. But there's one person that seemed to have slipped through the cracks, and that would be Don Lemon. For some reason, Don Lemon got lucky and had a judge that declined to have the case brought against him, declined to have him prosecuted. And that judge, what's funny is once I heard about that, I was like, who is this judge? This has to be a deep state judge. There's no way that this is a normal, regular judge that, yeah, maybe he was covered in baby oil and he slipped away. You know what I'm saying? You never know. But I was like, this judge has to be in on it. He has to be an operative, because there's no way any judge in their right mind would just completely ignore the law and let this guy go, right? So then I started looking up, like, who is the judge that let Don Lemon go? And I couldn't find anything at first. The only thing I kept finding was Minnesota judge let Don Lemon go, Minnesota judge, and they never said who the judge was. So I had to actually get on Google and just type in, actually, who is this judge that let Don Lemon off the hook? And it turns out that the judge's name is Douglas Micko. Who is Douglas Micko? Judge blocks charges against Don Lemon. Douglas Micko, U.S. magistrate judge, denies charges against Don Lemon, citing lack of probable cause. But he committed the crime, and it was on camera. So why did this judge let him go? Well, Minnesota federal magistrate judge Douglas Micko drew attention after refusing to approve criminal charges against journalist Don Lemon, who had attended a protest inside a St. Paul's City's church. The protest disrupted a church service attended by an ICE official, and Micko's decision prevented the government from pursuing some of the charges against Lemon and other local activists, according to CBS. So some of the charges, which means there's still charges that he can be charged with. So let's keep that in mind. So who is this judge, right? Judge Micko serves as a U.S. magistrate judge for the Minnesota District Court, a position he has held since April 2023. So he's one of those auto-pen Biden appointees. Magistrate judges are appointed by the district courts and are responsible for preliminary criminal proceedings, civil pretrial matters, and other tasks delegated by district judges, making them a vital part of the federal judiciary's operation. Before joining the bench, Micko worked as a federal public defender representing clients in serious federal cases. Sources cited by CBS News noted that his experience in defense work has influenced his careful assessment of probable cause and adherence to legal procedures in high-profile cases such as the Lemon matter. So he is an auto pen judge that was a public defender prior, right? Now check this out. You know who that immediately reminded me of? You remember the Pauly Shore looking chick I showed you on the last show? Catherine Menendez, or Kate Menendez. The Honorable Kate Menendez, District of Minnesota. Well, get this. She was appointed by Biden, nominated by Biden in 2021, right? Another auto pen judge. And get this. She was a career federal public defender. So what the auto pen administration did was take all these crooked public defenders, public pretenders, and literally made them judges. That's a crazy coincidence, right? But as any real investigator would tell you, there's no such thing as coincidence. When there's too many correlations, there's a connection there. Now, this is the big debate that's happening right now, right? Leaked ICE memo. Federal agents allowed to illegally kick in your door without a warrant. Now, that's a loaded title, because to say if they're allowed to do it, then that means it's legal. It's not illegal. So for them to categorize it as illegally, it's contradicting the allowed word in that statement. So now they're putting out self-contradicting statements. But this is where the debate comes in. Is it allowed or is it not allowed? Well, under normal circumstances, with American law enforcement dealing with American citizens and American residents with legal status in this country who are actually afforded constitutional protections, they're not allowed to just kick in your door and go grab you because you're an American citizen and you have certain protections under the Constitution. But what sets ICE apart and what gives them the ability to enter your home is the fact that they are dealing with foreign nationals who do not have legal status in America. Thus, they're not afforded constitutional protections. So all this constitutional shit that they're talking does not apply to these illegal aliens. And thus, the necessity for a warrant does not apply under those circumstances, because the person being sought after is a foreign national, and the agency soughting after that's soughting, I don't know if that's a word, that's seeking after this person, is an agency specifically designed to capture, and deport foreign nationals. So ICE would be considered more constitutionally more paramilitary than law enforcement, because law enforcement deals with the law, and the supreme law would be the Constitution. So even when the critics say ICE is a paramilitary militia force, in a way they're right, but it's more of a governmental military force because they're dealing with foreign nationals. And that's the part that they keep leaving out of the conversation in order to give the other side of the argument any semblance of validity. They have to start off their argument or premise their argument on the false pretext that constitutional protections apply to foreign nationals residing in the United States without legal authorization to reside in the United States. So essentially, they're equating these illegal aliens to legal migrants or legal immigrants with legal status, which they are not. So they get no due process. You don't need a warrant to go in their house. None of that shit. And only ICE can do it because they're the ones that have the authority to do that. So local police can't kick in the door of an illegal alien because the local police do not have the authority to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? To determine this person's legal status in the United States. But ICE has the authority to do that. And once the determination is made that this person does not have legal status in the United States, a judge immediately issues a final removal order, which is a deportation order. And then it's ICE's job to go out and execute that order. So essentially, the final removal order would be considered the warrant because it is signed by a judge, but they call it an administrative warrant because this is an administrative process. And it has to be an administrative process rather than the traditional constitutional process, because we're dealing with people who legally do not have constitutional protections. We're dealing with foreign nationals. And for the people that get upset with ICE because they're stopping and IDing American citizens, ICE is dealing with a mass invasion of illegal aliens, foreign nationals without legal status in the United States. And for any governmental force, law enforcement or otherwise, based on your constitutional rights, they have to produce reasonable, articulable suspicion in order to detain you and demand your identification. But guess what? If ICE is going after people who are suspected of not having legal status in the United States, that excuse of reasonable articulable suspicion now can be used on anybody because they can stop anybody and ID anybody and say, well, we have reasonable articulable suspicion to believe that you don't have legal status in this country. So now we have to verify your status. Thus, you must now identify yourself. So even to American citizens, ICE is still going to be following the Constitution when they stop and ID you because they're stopping you under the premise that you're suspected of being in the country illegally. So no matter which way you slice it, there's no way to justify the other side's argument that ICE does not have the authority that they have. But again, because so many people they lack a basic understanding of how our laws work and how they're applied, it's very easy to pull the wool over their eyes and make them believe that it's just one big blanket operational procedure that ICE is just blatantly violating. No, it's not. Because the targets that are being sought after are not American nationals, they are foreign nationals. So it says this is illegal. Hang on a second. A May 12, 2025 internal ICE memo has been distributed to all ICE agents directing that they may illegally enter homes using an administrative warrant, an illegitimate document invented by DHS. Now, this is what they're claiming. Without a judicial warrant signed by a judge, agents are being told they can break into private residences based on any untrained ICE agent's belief that an undocumented person may be inside. So this article right here is just completely putting the left wing spin on it. But don't be thrown off by it. The administrative warrant, without being signed by a judge, because it's already the final deportation orders have already been signed off by a judge. That's the part that they're leaving out. Once the judge signs the order that we're going to conduct these mass deportations, that's it. The final order of removal is the warrant. And that's all they need. So before ICE kicks in your door, they'll knock on the door. And then they'll inform you that you're suspected of being in the country illegally. We need you to identify yourself. You identify yourself. Okay, you're here legally. Cool. Bye. See you later. Then they get to the other door. The person answers the door, refuses to identify themselves. Now suspicions of them being in the country illegally are heightened because of their refusal to identify. And now they get detained, and now they have to be forcefully identified. And once they're identified to be American citizens, bye, see ya. So the degree to which you're treated by ICE all depends on your response and your reaction as an American citizen. Because again, if you understand that as an American citizen, you have nothing to fear. ICE can't touch you as long as you don't impede their operations, then there'll be no problem. But the agitators are trying to create a problem where there is no problem by encouraging people to do it the hard way and refuse to identify, even though ICE can clearly give them reasonable articulable suspicion, considering the fact that millions of foreign nationals now reside in this country without legal status. Purely unconstitutional. This memo directly violates the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure shall not be violated. No executive memo, agency, court ruling, or simple act of Congress can override it. Legalizing warrantless home entry would require passing an entirely new constitutional amendment. Even the memo itself is illegal and violates the Constitution's supremacy clause. Well, here's the problem with their whole it's unconstitutional problem, the argument. The Constitution doesn't apply to illegal aliens. You see where it says here, the right of the people? Illegal aliens and people residing in this country without legal status are not considered the people. Mr. Dunham says they're going into non-immigrant homes. One state is encouraging folks to film ICE at all times, and it's allowed by law. Also, the mask is an issue, especially to Americans. Well, Mr. Dunham, you seem to be forgetting that these very same people making an issue out of law enforcement wearing masks when law enforcement has been always wearing masks when they deal with organized crime. These were the same people trying to force everybody and their kids to wear masks back in 2020. And remember, just like I said, the people that refuse to identify whether they're American citizens or not, they now come under suspicion of not being American citizens or not having legal status. Thus, ICE will enter their home. That's how it goes. You refuse to identify, you'll be forcefully identified. That's how it goes, because ICE's job is to go after non-citizens. People with, not non-citizens, because there's people with green cards that aren't citizens. To go after foreign nationals with no legal status, illegal aliens. So all they need is suspicion, because remember, we're under a mass occupation. And I said earlier, I guess you must have missed that part, Mr. Dunham. Under normal circumstances, it is allowed by law to film law enforcement. Absolutely. But now those people that are filming ICE are being considered terrorists and being put on a terrorist watch list because ICE is going after terrorist groups. They're going after sleeper cells. They're going after illegal aliens who are members of criminal organizations, and they're in possession of high-powered weapons, explosives, military-grade explosives, and their job is to do exactly what those sleeper cells in Iran did. The media is going to get all the people in the streets to go protest, and then they're going to activate the sleeper cells to kill the people. so they can blame Trump for it. So we're under totally different circumstances, and the people that are perceived by the federal government as aiding and abetting these illegal aliens are automatically going to be perceived as aiding and abetting these terrorist organizations who are using the mass influx of illegal aliens as cover. So if it was regular law enforcement who's tasked with dealing with Americans on a level of you're an American with constitutional protections, and not a federal agency who's tasked with dealing with foreign nationals, the situation would be totally different, and you would be absolutely right. But this is a different case. The Constitution does not apply here because the Constitution does not apply to illegal aliens. And that is the stark difference. When you're dealing with foreign nationals, especially a mass number that's invaded your country, anybody trying to use the Constitution to offer them protection is literally trying to legitimize their status here in the United States, which in itself is not only unconstitutional, but criminal. So when the Constitution refers to the people, it's talking about the nationals of this nation, not foreign nationals who have not been accepted or authorized to reside in this nation. You don't just hop the border and get default constitutional rights. It don't work like that. And remember, these same liberals that are trying to invoke the Constitution to protect these illegals are the same liberals that were ignoring the Constitution to take away our free speech, ignoring the Constitution to take away our right to choose, ignoring the Constitution when they try to force the masks and the vaccines on us. They ignore the Constitution when they pass their gun control laws. Now, all of a sudden, the Constitution matters. So the Constitution, to them, the Constitution doesn't apply to Americans. It only applies to these illegals. Now the Constitution means something because we can use it to protect illegal aliens. You see the disconnect there? So Americans don't get constitutional rights, but the illegals do, right? That's why I don't have a problem with this, because they're foreign nationals. And guess what? If ICE knocks on my door, I got a blue passport. So if they need me to identify myself, they don't even need to see my passport. They just need my name and my birth certificate and my date of birth. That's it. And once I identify myself and I'm found to be of legal status in the United States, my constitutional protections apply. ICE no longer has authority over me. So if they want to get the FBI or Homeland Security to come in my house, now they got to go get a warrant from a judge because they're dealing with an American citizen who actually has constitutional protections. But if I'm under suspicion of not having legal status in the United States and I fail to identify, well, now I'm going to be forcefully identified because I'm still under suspicion of not being in the United States legally. And the masks, Mr. Dunham, are not an issue to Americans. It's an issue to the liberals. Because every other American with common sense knows that they can just get on Google and type in SWAT team drug raid and click images and see how many cops with masks pop up in those images. Police have always worn masks. This is nothing new. And the people trying to pretend that it's something new, they're lying to you. Straight up, flat out lying to you. There's no other word for it. You are being deceived. And unfortunately, if it wasn't for these idiot liberals believing the mainstream media narrative and taking to the streets and doxing these ICE agents so harm can come to them and their families, because ICE is going after cartel operatives in a lot of these cities, They wouldn't have to wear masks. But now they have to wear masks because not only are they dealing with a foreign enemy, but they're dealing with domestic collaborators of that foreign enemy who's willing to put their lives and their families at risk just for the sake of some political clout. So circumstances are different. These are special circumstances because we're dealing with a foreign invasion. And there's too many Americans that are hopelessly deceived that are aiding and abetting this invasion. And this foreign invasion is designed to give cover to criminal networks whose job it is to exterminate us in mass numbers once the order is given. They literally just did it in Iran. You think they won't do it over here? You got to be stupid. ICE's authority doesn't exist. Despite its sweeping use as the government's secret police, ICE has absolutely no police authority. It is a civil immigration agency with very narrow, limited powers over non-citizens only. You see, didn't I just tell you that? Once they identify you as an American citizen or a legal resident of this country, they no longer have power over you. And these non-citizens only are actually foreign nationals who don't have constitutional protection. So they're right in saying ICE has no police authority because they don't have the authority to incarcerate American citizens. But they do have the authority to capture foreign nationals and remove them from the country. That's their authority. They are not legally authorized to conduct raids, make warrantless arrests, stop people at random, or detain U.S. citizens. They are abusing power that was never granted to them on orders from a fascist government. Well, we know who really wrote this, right? Some half a fag liberal wrote this stupid shit because this is stupid shit. And it's clearly designed to sway your opinion in the direction of defending the illegal aliens. ICE does have authority to conduct raids, and they do have authority to arrest and stop people at random. They do, because their job is to identify and remove foreign nationals. That's their job. That's their mission. And that's been their job since Bush created the agency in 2002. But you already know, once they say fascist government, they call the Trump administration a fascist government. You already know it's some bullshit ass liberal. Now, here's the fun part that legitimizes everything that I was saying. Democrats are doing nothing. In response to this illegal and unconstitutional memo, Democratic congressional leadership has taken no action to block or restrain these abuses of power. Instead, reports indicate party leaders Schumer and Jeffries have internally greenlit an appropriations package to increase DHS funding to $170 billion, including more ICE enforcement and construction of additional concentration camps. Now, you know why the Democrats are going along with ICE? Because the Democrats in Congress, they're all lawyers. And they know that what these liberals are saying about what ICE is doing being illegal is stupid and it's bullshit. They also know that what these liberals that follow them are saying, that what ICE is doing is unconstitutional, is also bullshit. But they're not going to tell their followers that. They're going to let their followers keep believing that bullshit while they silently and quietly follow the law, because as lawyers, they understand exactly what it was that I'm explaining to you. ICE's job is to capture and remove foreign nationals who do not have legal status in the United States. And if you do not have legal status in the United States of America, you are not entitled to constitutional protections as someone who would have legal status in the United States of America. These Democrats know this. And that's why they're not opposing ICE as hard as the people that follow them believe they should. But they're not going to get up there publicly and say, hey, listen, guys, y'all need to calm the fuck down. We can't do anything about ICE because ICE's job is to deal with foreign nationals who don't have constitutional protection. So all this constitutional shit y'all talking, kill that noise, kill that shit, dead that shit. Because the Constitution don't apply to these people. So calm the fuck down. They'll never say that. They'll let their people keep believing the lies so they can keep taking to the streets in large enough numbers to where they can stage the mass killings. And they will stage the mass killings and they will kill their own people just to forward their political agenda. Right, Jason M. Schmidt. He says fascist concentration camps. They seem to forget that was their people, socialists. Yeah, exactly. But that's what they do, Jason. They project. They project big time. Now, while all this is going on, the sleeper cells are being removed. The illegal aliens are being mopped up. The fraud's being brought to a halt. You got Jonathan Greenblatt, the leader of the Anti-Defamation League. He's out here losing his shit. He's threatening Americans. ADL leader Jonathan Greenblatt says Americans who criticize Jews in Israel will be monitored by the FBI. We will monitor social media and check your bank accounts, says Jonathan Greenblatt. This is the same guy that said we got to teach Kanye West a lesson. But he's just all talk. They're not going to do shit because the FBI has got their hands full with these criminal networks that the same Zionist puppet politicians led into the country. And the ADL has no power to do anything to your bank account. And in fact, they have no power at all because they're boots on the ground operatives. Many of them have already been removed. Now, why is he throwing this hissy fit? What's this? What is all this about? Where is all this coming from? Well, this is coming from the fact that Israel is under severe threat from Iran. And it appears as if Iran is going to go through with it and completely destroy Israel. And when that happens, a lot of Americans are going to be basically praising Iran for what they did. And these Zionists are going to lose their minds. So Jonathan Greenblatt is trying to put this threat out there to kind of silence any dissent or any person that might be in agreement with Iran's actions against Israel, because they want to continue playing the poor little victims and God's chosen people, so they can't have anybody in America really exposing what they were about, because any exposure of what they've been doing and what they're really about will amount to a justification for Iran doing what they did. So they have to remove any reason to justify Iran leveling Israel by silencing anybody who may expose what Israel's really been doing. And now they're false flagging themselves because real Jew haters, they don't go around putting up flyers. But you know who does? People who want to play victim. Nazi flyers threaten Jewish children at Charlotte Jewish School campus. Charlotte, North Carolina, January 20th, 2026. It says, whether you swing to the left or whether you swing to the right, we will simply swing you by the neck. And this is what these small hats do, though. They false flag. And it's the same program that they were hyping up all the black liberals to do when Trump first got elected. Remember all the fake hate crimes and the letters they were sending to themselves and the graffiti and all that shit they were doing themselves and claiming that it was Trump supporters that did it, even the Jesse Smollett shit. Where do you think they learned all those tactics from? They learned those tactics from the small hats. This is what the small hats do. So now they're starting to false flag themselves to pretend as if like there's these white nationalist neo-Nazis running around looking to hang Jews. Ain't that something? But maybe 10 years ago, this might have worked and got all the hype and got all the media attention. But in this day and age, nobody's even batting an eye. I bet most of you guys never even seen this report because nobody gives a fuck. We're actually waiting for Israel to get demolished so the world can go back to being peaceful. So Donald Trump gave this antagonistic speech at Davos. He got up there and he cooked everybody. And this was his tweet after the Davos meeting. He says, heading back to D.C., it was an incredible time in Davos. The Greenland structure is being worked on and will be amazing for the USA, and the Board of Peace is something that the world has never seen before. Very special. So many good things happening. President Donald J. Trump. And that brings me to the Board of Peace. Now, before we get to the Board of Peace, let's get back to the ICE shit for a minute, right? Because the next round of the latest round of feeling sorry for the illegals is the fact that there was an incident where ICE actually took a 5-year-old boy into custody. There was a couple incidences where the illegal alien parents got taken into custody with their kids and shipped to a detention center because their kids are anchor babies. And this is why Trump wants to return the 14th Amendment protections back to Black Americans and not expand it to foreign nationals, because now that will allow ICE to deport the entire family instead of being restricted from deporting the children and only being able to deport the parents. Right lies that bind. If that was a real ICE memo, they wouldn't say illegally. But in this explanation of the memo, they use the word illegally because that's their own interpretation. That's their own spin on it. So they never actually tell you what the memo actually says. They just put their own spin on what they want you to believe the memo actually says. That's how they're playing it. But yeah, now they're trying to use the poor little anchor babies as poor little victims. But in the case with the 5-year-old, what happened was the father got stopped by ICE. He was going to get arrested and deported. And the child, of course, was going to either go to next of kin or CPS care. And the father jumped out the car and ran and left the kid. So, of course, ICE had to take custody of the child because the child was abandoned by his father, who didn't want to get deported. You know, and for you illegals that have been in the country long enough to lay down and fucking make babies, all that time you spent fucking, you should have been down at the immigration office getting your fucking papers right. That's what you should have been doing. That's what you should have been doing. But instead, you're fucking and making anchor babies, and now you got to be separated from your anchor babies because you didn't get your shit in order. You didn't get your shit together. You know, they try to make the pity case saying, oh, this person has lived in the United States for 20 years and they're now being deported. Well, that means you had 20 years to get your shit together. It doesn't make you look better or more like a victim. It actually makes you look stupid, and it makes you look like somebody who's just trying to get over and has been getting over for 20 years because you should have took your ass down to the immigration office, paid the fucking money, and got your goddamn papers is what you should have did. You had 20 fucking years to do it. So the fact that you didn't do it shows that you had no intention of doing it. You were going to continue on the free ride. Well, guess what? The gravy train has stopped and the free rides are over. And make sure y'all hit that like button. We got 65 watching on YouTube and 50 likes. Hit the like button, and don't forget to hit the Cash App, the PayPal, or the Venmo and support the show. Hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, all that shit. All of that shit. Hit all them buttons. All right, so let's continue on. Might be a short show tonight because it's cold and my nose is runny, and I hate having to keep pausing all the time, but we shall press on. So, breaking. President Putin says Russia is ready to contribute $1 billion to President Trump's Board of Peace and accepts Trump's offer to join. Trump is the peace president of the world, peace through strength. And again, the removal of these foreign nationals in America is also a part of returning peace. removing the fraud, removing the imminent terrorist threat. So if people want to take to the streets and peacefully protest, there's no fear of sleeper cells activating and mowing them down for some political agenda. Again, and I can't stress it enough, like we just saw them do in Iran. So Putin now has had Russia join the Board of Peace. Putin's Greenland master stroke. So Putin was involved with the Greenland business, but he was keeping Europe busy on the Eastern Front while Trump was keeping the EU busy on the Western Front with Greenland. But President Putin just dismantled the European Union's grip on Greenland with a 5D chess play that gives Trump a total free hand. None of our business. Putin officially declares Russia won't interfere, effectively clearing the path for a U.S. Greenland deal. Putin cites the 1917 land sales between Denmark and the USA as a precedent. If they did it then, why not now? Putin exposes Denmark's harsh and cruel treatment of Greenland as a colony, framing the U.S. move as a necessary rescue mission. Putin runs the math, comparing it to the Alaska purchase, $7.2 million in 1867. He calculates Greenland's value at roughly $200 million to $1 billion in inflation-adjusted gold terms. Bravo, Putin. The world is watching the ultimate power play. See, I told you, Putin and Trump are allies. And as Trump is trying to affect the power shift from the traditional controllers of the world back into the hands of the people of this nation, Putin's trying to do the same thing for his nation. And all the nations in the Board of Peace are eventually going to be on the same path if they're not there already. Now, Israel, they're the outlier. Now, after Trump while Trump was at Davos cooking the deep state, Putin was doing a speech in Russia cooking the Rothschilds. In a bizarre and radical pivot, Vladimir Putin has redefined the enemy in the ongoing European conflict. State media is now reporting that Russia is shifting its operational focus from fighting NATO and Ukraine to dismantling the financial influence of the Rothschild family and the Western banking elite in Europe. And all this right on the heels of Trump preparing to file $100 billion lawsuit against JP Morgan, which is one of the biggest Rothschild banks. This narrative shift serves two critical strategic goals in the 2026 timeline. So let's see what those goals are. It aligns with Musk's puppet master theory. Just days after Elon Musk claimed that the Western politicians are actors controlled by unseen scriptwriters, Putin is effectively naming the villains in that script. He's telling the European public, your leaders are puppets of the Rothschilds. I am fighting the puppets, not you. It facilitates the European reset, by framing the war as a crusade against a corrupt financial cabal rather than against the nations of France or Germany. Putin creates the political space to offer the unconditional restoration of ties. He announced earlier, he is giving European populists a moral excuse to stop supporting Ukraine. Why die for the bankers? This marks the transition from kinetic war, tanks in Donbass, to hybrid financial war, cyber attacks on SWIFT. That's the Federal Reserve International Money Transfer System, seizing assets and funding anti-bank populist movements. It effectively declares that the old order of Europe is the target, not its people. You see? And that's Trump's target too. But you see, the old order of America, they need the American people to believe that the American people are Trump's target, so the people turn against Trump and stymie his agenda to end their corrupt system of control. Just like they've been painting Putin as a villain in the media to get the people of the world to turn against Putin, because Putin has disrupted their system of control. And mind you, Putin had just deported all the members of the Rothschild family that were living in Russia. How about that? Now, this is also part of what ICE is trying to do in terms of getting rid of these sleeper cells. DHS cited foreign students' writings and protests before their arrests. Documents unsealed by a federal judge on Thursday include dossiers that investigators prepared on pro-Palestinian student activists before they were targeted for deportation. Now, this is where it gets confusing for a lot of people because they believe because these students were pro-Palestinian activists and Trump is owned by Israel, Trump is trying to silence the quote-unquote anti-Semitism on behalf of Israel. But the part of the story people don't know is that the leaders of these pro-Palestinian protests at these colleges, these so-called college student activists, are actually Israeli Mossad spies. And their job is to pretend to be pro-Palestinian so they can co-opt the pro-Palestinian movement and turn it into a violent riot. So that way, the American public now gets a negative perception of the pro-Palestinian crowd, which by default then reinforces their positive perception of Israel. So their job was to co-opt the pro-Palestinian protests, lead them into criminal activities so they can become demonized, which will then stymie support for the Palestinian people and reinforce support for the Israeli regime. Not only that, but these pro-Palestinian activists, these so-called student activists, being Israeli Mossad spies, they were also the ones that were in charge of trafficking the weapons and organizing the sleeper cells who were actually going to take to the streets and start mowing down protesters. These were the guys who the orders were going to come down to from the top, and they were going to relay the orders to the guys in the streets. So these pro-Palestinian student activists was actually a very essential network to the a very essential layer to the sleeper cell network. They were part of the command and control structure, but they were posing as pro-Palestinians so they can gain the support of the American people. So when the federal government discovers who they actually are and decides to get rid of them and remove them from the country, they'll have the support of the people. Like that Mahmoud Khalil kid, guy that was one of the first pro-Palestinian activists to get deported from America. It was big news, and everybody was like, "Oh, Trump's getting rid of him because of anti-Semitism, and he's kissing up to Israel and this and that." And turned out Khalil Mahmoud is a fucking Mossad spy for Israel. How you like that? Because you see, the real people in America that support Palestine and were speaking out against Israel, that's what they were doing. They weren't taken to the streets in America. They were online, making their voices heard. They were also sending aid and material support to the Palestinian people while they were under the Israeli genocide. They weren't holding up signs and marching in the streets. The motherfuckers holding up signs and marching in the streets, those were the Israeli Mossad agents trying to redirect that energy into something meaningless that wouldn't help the Palestinian people, but in fact would hurt the Palestinian cause, because these same groups taken to the streets were encouraged to be violent, turn into mobs and riot. And that's exactly what they were doing. Barnes, I see you're on fire emoji. I can see it. Red Lioness says paid protesters. Correct. In fact, they're worse than paid protesters. They were paid agitators. That's different, because a paid protester is somebody on the payroll to go out, hold up a sign, and do some chants. A paid agitator is somebody paid to go out, hold up a sign, do some chants, and commit some violence. And these college students that were the pro-Palestine movement, they were terrorizing Jewish college students who may have been in support of what Israel was doing, but materially had literally nothing to do with what Israel was doing. They were just terrorizing the college students because they were Jewish. Which I don't agree with. Because if you're going to peacefully protest, you can't peacefully protest while infringing on someone else's right. But that's what they were being paid to do. And the reason why they were being paid to do that was in order to strengthen support for the Israel lobby. So they can say, you know, this is why you need to support Israel. Look at these pro-Palestinians. They're animals. They're rioters. They're domestic terrorists. They're this, they're that. And it's Israeli Mossad agents leading the charge all along. That was the play. But it didn't work because the Trump administration was one step ahead of their asses and got them all the fuck out of here. So that scheme failed miserably. Now, this is the logo you noticed on the thumbnail. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Board of Peace. And this map here shows states whose leaders I had to sneeze real quick. States whose leaders accepted their personal invitation to the Board of Peace. And as you can see, many of these nations have already had strong alliances with President Trump. The Board of Peace is an international organization established by U.S. President Donald Trump that is nominally proposed to promote peacekeeping. The board was proposed in September 2025 and was established in January 2026. And this is going to be the competing body to the outdated United Nations. Trump pulled out of the UN and started his own shit. Talk about independence. It invokes United Nations Security Council Resolution 2803 that had welcomed an announcement initiative by Trump to help in the post-war reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, alongside the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. Critics argue that the institution bears little resemblance to what was envisioned under Resolution 2803. The Guardian described it as a pay-to-play club, right? But it bears little resemblance to the pay-to-play club, but they're trying to demonize the movement because, again, this is the international control establishment trying to stop the people of the world from making their own decisions. Yeah, Andrew P., Europe is definitely fucked. Where are we at? Oh, centered on Donald Trump rather than a Gaza-focused mechanism. On the 22nd of January, 2026, Trump hosted a signing ceremony for the founding charter of the Board of Peace on the sidelines of the 56th World Economic Forum in Davos. Leaders and foreign ministers of 19 countries, excluding the United States, attended the Board of Peace signing ceremony in Davos and signed the founding charter. The board has been described as a vanity project by the Sydney Morning Herald and a fledgling club of autocrats, and an organization which, although it may lack Miss Universe's credibility, compensates through sheer chutzpah by the Financial Times. So you see how all these deep state outlets are now demonizing? They're now demonizing the Board of Peace. Again, that's because the Board of Peace will be a competing body with the controllers, United Nations. So they're trying to demonize it. They're trying to delegitimize it. But the more shit that these establishment media outlets talk about the Board of Peace is the more legitimacy they're giving the Board of Peace in the minds of the people. Because the people already know we can't trust these media outlets. We've seen the garbage they've been putting out for the last 10 years. So now we have to assume this shit they're putting out is garbage too. Because if it was such garbage, if the Board of Peace was such garbage, why are so many nations quick to sign on? Because everybody wants to be cool with Donald Trump. Okay, let's continue. Few world leaders have publicly accepted Trump's invitation or said if they have paid for membership. Experts have said Trump is trying to make the organization into an alternative to the United Nations Security Council, where only Trump has veto power. Of course, the experts are going to say that. These are the same experts that told you, even though you could smell a fart through jeans, a cloth mask would stop a virus. Some fucking experts they are. France voiced concern that it seeks to usurp the role of the United Nations. Trump has claimed that his board might replace the UN. And of course, France, led by the fag in chief Macron, of course, they're going to be opposed to it because they're not invited. I'll show you the map in a second. So Donald Trump is named as chairman in the charter of the Board of Peace and is a member for life. So Donald Trump went from being president of the United States to basically being president of the world, because the Board of Peace is going to overshadow the UN. Because the nations that are member nations of the UN have been consistently been extorted by the World Economic, not the World Economic Forum, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The nations that are part of the Board of Peace are going to be doing business with the BRICS Development Bank and with the United States of America Central Bank once we get rid of the Federal Reserve. And these will be the more prosperous nations of the world, where the member nations of the IMF, which are majority UN nations, they're going to fall by the wayside and continue to be extorted until they smarten up and decide to play ball. Yeah, Macron is in bed with a man he calls Brigitte, too. So we already know what time it is with Macron. The charter of the Board of Peace outlines a multi-level structure for the organization, which includes Chairman Donald Trump, who is not subject to a term limit and is a member for life. The main Board of Peace, composed mainly of the leaders of countries, about 60 have been invited. The Executive Board, with a focus on diplomacy and investment, and that's the important part right there, the investment part. That's going to build the member nations up. 7 members have been appointed. The Gaza Executive Board to direct the National Committee for Administration of Gaza, which will administer the territory, which means power over Gaza has been officially stripped from Israel. And this is why Israel had to be brought into the Board of Peace, so they'll be subject to the terms of the charter. So if they violate the terms of that charter, any member nation of the Board of Peace can take action against Israel. So Israel is no longer a lone ranger like they used to be, where they could do what they want and use their elements of infiltration in foreign countries to keep those foreign countries at bay and use the United States as their attack dog. They don't have that capability anymore. So not only have they been isolated, but they've also been pigeonholed. Which will administer its territory. Its head is titled the High Representative for Gaza, and Nikolay Mladenov has been appointed along with 10 other members. Nikolay Mladenov, that sounds like a Russian name, don't it? Now, here's a little bit about Donald Trump as chairman. Donald Trump is explicitly named in the charter of the Board of Peace as its inaugural chairman. The chairman has no term limit, and they alone have the authority to nominate their designated successor. Only the chairman has the ability to invite countries to join the board. The chairman has the exclusive authority to create, modify, or dissolve subsidiary entities of the Board of Peace. And by subsidiary entities, that also includes member nations. So that means Trump actually will, with Israel being a member of the Board of Peace, Trump would actually have the power to dissolve the nation of Israel as a nation. This is fucking huge. All revisions to the charter and administrative directives issued by the Board of Peace are subject to approval by the chairman. Trump's chairmanship of the Board of Peace is independent to him holding the presidency of the United States, and he has indicated that he would like to remain chairman for life. And this is a map of the Board of Peace that's color-coded. The yellow are all the nations that have been invited. The red are all the nations that are current members that have accepted their invitation. And if you notice the yellow, the nations that have been invited, these are the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, China, India. You see that? The BRICS nations. Declined. The countries that were declined, their invitations were declined, or they were not invited in some cases. Here you have Greenland and the European Union. And the reason why Greenland declined their invitation to the Board of Peace is because Greenland is about to surrender their sovereignty to the United States and become a United States territory. And when Greenland becomes a United States territory, they'll then become a member of the Board of Peace under the umbrella of the United States by default. But the European Union is all in blue because they are the enemies. So what we're looking at in this map right here, right? All the blue nations and the green who had their invitations withdrawn. So Canada was invited too, and Trump said, nah, fuck Canada, you're not welcome. So the green and the blue nations are all the nations that remain under the control of the Rothschild banking system and the Zionist regime. And 10 years ago, if we categorize this blue as the Zionist regime control, Rothschild banking system control, the blue would have taken up most of the world. But now they've been shrunken down and relegated to this tiny little bit of land right here in Europe. Meanwhile, the rest of the world presses forward with economic growth, new working relationships, a whole new financial system, gold-backed currency, and better international trade deals. So Donald Trump is literally changing the world with this Board of Peace. So what he's doing by removing by ending the fraud that's taken place in America, removing the influx of foreign nationals, eventually prosecuting these crooked politicians that have been selling us out. Essentially, Trump is removing the mechanisms of control by the deep state domestically in America through those methods and means. Meanwhile, through the Board of Peace, he's also removing the mechanisms of control that had controlled the entire world. So as he's freeing America, he's also freeing the rest of the world, which I think is fucking awesome. Oh, shit, there's a blown up version of the map right there. So, in other words, the Zionist regime and the Rothschild banking system went from having all this control over the entire world to being relegated to right here. So, in other words, the Zionists are losing this fight. The international controllers are losing this fight, and it's all being done under Donald Trump. And through his alliance with Vladimir Putin, there's no military power on earth that could challenge that agenda. None. The European Union talked all that shit and did all their posturing. But how much military force can they muster from this little tiny piece of land compared to all this red you see all around them? And once all the yellow starts to turn red, like the invitations get accepted, because Russia accepted their invitation. So Russia's now red. There's no military force on earth that can oppose what's happening. Trump literally took over the world and kicked the Rothschilds out with the help of Vladimir Putin. Now, these are the member nations of the Board of Peace: Albania, Argentina, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Belarus, Bulgaria, Egypt, Hungary, Indonesia, Israel, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, Kuwait, Mongolia, Morocco, Pakistan, Paraguay, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, United States, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. Now, if you look here where Israel is, check this out. Jordan has a problem with Israel. Egypt has a problem with Israel. Bahrain has a problem with Israel. Armenia has a problem with Israel. Argentina has a problem with Israel. You see the picture I'm painting here? Pakistan has a problem with Israel. Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the United Emirates have a problem with Israel. You see what's happening here? Israel is being pigeonholed and they're being put under the control of nations that are their enemies. So if ever the Board of Peace decides they want to dissolve Israel, or they decide whatever is going to happen to Israel is going to happen to Israel, or they greenlight Iran's counterstrike on Israel after that mass attack that they just carried out with their sleeper cells, well, there's a lot of member nations in the Board of Peace that are going to say, yeah, we're gonna turn our back on Israel. And although Trump is the chairman and has total veto power and the final say, Trump is a man of the people. And whatever the majority of the member nations decide is going to happen, Trump is going to go along with what the member nations say. And these member nations, more than likely, based on what they've been saying during the genocide, they're going to say, green light Iran. And Trump don't intervene. So Trump literally gave himself another excuse to not help Israel anymore. Not only is he going to have his hands full with the Mexican cartel war, but he's also going to be restrained now by the member nations of the Board of Peace that are going to object to him intervening on Israel's behalf. Colleen on Rumble says, what's going on with China? What's going on with China is Russia has the leash on China because China is solely dependent on Russia for their crude oil and their energy resources. And as you can see here, China is painted in yellow because China too has been invited to the Board of Peace. They just haven't signed on yet. And the reason why they haven't signed on is because they're actually trying to compete with Russia to become the next world military superpower outside the United States. But because Russia has a stranglehold on them with the energy markets and their dependence on Russian oil, now that Russia is going to be getting the oil from Venezuela by way of Trump's deals, China is going to become further subjugated, which will eventually force them to accept the invitation of the Board of Peace, which will now make them subject to the terms of the Board of Peace, which means their autonomy is now going to be limited by the other member nations, which means they'll be forced to cooperate. So what's happening with China is they're going from being able to go rogue to being forced into cooperation and capitulation. Barnes says, Citizen Man, how is Bibi able to stick around as Israel's prime minister? Well, Barnes, unfortunately, it's because he is the prime minister, and it's up to the people of Israel to determine who their prime minister should be. And the reason why Trump intervened with Maduro is because the people of Venezuela did not vote for Maduro. Maduro's own people determined who the president of Venezuela should be, thus undermining the will of the people, right? But if it's the will of the people of Israel to have Netanyahu as their prime minister, so shall it be. But here's the thing, Barnes. Here's where it gets real interesting. Netanyahu shall remain the prime minister because when the downfall of Israel and the destruction of Israel starts to happen and the Board of Peace okays it, Netanyahu is going to be the man in charge when it happens. Netanyahu is going to be the man overseeing the downfall of Israel. Thus, his reputation will go down in flames as the worst leader Israel ever had, because under his leadership, Israel was completely destroyed. You peep game? Give me a second, y'all. I'm all out of tissue. I got to re-up on my tissue real quick. All right, I'm back. So you guys see what's happening here. This is the power shift that we're witnessing, and the Board of Peace is going to be at the center of this power shift, and Trump is going to personally oversee this power shift. And this is why the entire establishment hates Donald Trump so much, because he has stripped them of their power and he has shifted power to the good guys and taken away their credibility to claim who the good guys and the bad guys are by exposing them as the bad guys. Now we see for ourselves. And between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, there ain't a goddamn thing that no other country on earth or no other groups of countries on earth can do about it. And once this is all said and done, gas is about to be super cheap. The terrorist threat around the world is about to be eradicated and eliminated because the Israeli Mossad agents, their checks won't show up no more. So they're not going to work anymore. And the ones that are out there doing really bad stuff are going to be captured and killed in whatever nations they're operating in, just like the ones in Iran that turned up and killed those thousands of innocent Iranians, just so their media can turn around and blame Ayatollah Khomeini for it. Oh, yeah, they're about to pay for all of that shit. And their operatives and sleeper cells here in the United States that was holding the United States hostage, they're being removed along with every collaborator that's been working with them and aiding and abetting them, including the politicians and the protesters on the streets. And a lot of shit's about to change. You see, parts of Nasara have already been implemented in America domestically. And what we're seeing now with the Board of Peace, this is JASARA, the Global Economic Security and Reformations Act. So shout out to Trump. Shout out to Trump for making it happen. Because not only is he dealing with the problems domestically and cleaning up the shit domestically, but he's also helping the rest of the world clean up their shit at the same time, while he's facing the biggest amount of opposition any president has ever faced in American history. And he still somehow managed to do it. That is simply extraordinary. And Red Lioness says, I love to see a Trump hotel built of ice in Iceland. Well, it'll actually be in Greenland, but yeah, we all know he wants to put one in Gaza. And Trump's plan to rebuild Gaza involves returning Gaza to the Palestinian people and also returning parts of Israel that have been stolen by the Zionists from the Palestinians back to the Palestinian people. A while back, I showed you a map of Trump's resettlement plan for the Palestinian people. And when you look closely at the map, there's parts of Israel that are currently now under Israeli control that will be returned to the Palestinian people. And I think it's going to be more than just those little spots on the map. And again, this is why it's important that Israel also be a part of the Board of Peace, so they'll be subject to the terms. So when the nations, the member nations decide, you know what, we'll dissolve Israel and we'll recognize Palestine as a nation, which the UN has already done. The Board of Peace, if they decide that that's the way they want to go, ain't a goddamn thing Israel can do about it. And all those Zionists in Israel that were terrorizing the Palestinians and stealing their land and shit, if they try that shit now, foreign military is going to be touching down and taking them into custody under Trump's orders. So the plan to rebuild Gaza is to rebuild Gaza for the Palestinian people. That's why he created the Gaza administration and their local people, local Palestinians who are going to be in charge of that administration. And now with the Board of Peace, they'll have the financial support of all the member nations and the BRICS Development Bank, because The funding for those nations will come from the BRICS Development Bank, and those nations will be able to forward that money to the Palestinian Authority so they can rebuild Gaza and rebuild their resettled parts of the Zionist regime nation of Israel that was stolen from them. So this is what righting the ship looks like. And this is a very integral part of that process. And unfortunately, it sucks that it took 2 years of genocide in Gaza for this to all come to fruition, but it's finally here and it's finally happened, which means we will never see another Israeli genocide in Gaza as long as the Board of Peace exists and Trump sits as the chairman. Hell, Israel will be lucky if their nation isn't dissolved by the end of the year. This is the power shift. We're witnessing it firsthand, and we all got a front row seat to it. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. This is the power shift that we've all been wishing for our entire lives once we realized who really held the power in this country. And for people out there to continue to fall for the establishment media narrative that Trump bad, they are completely blind to the fact that everything that Trump is doing is the exact same thing that we all wanted to see other presidents do when we believed that those presidents were not involved in the crimes, when we believed that those presidents were on the up and up like they purported themselves to be. Like we believed when those presidents, being the deep state puppets that they are, were pretending as if they were going to clean up the corruption and return power to the people. Now we're actually seeing it be done. But for so many Americans, though, here's the sad part. They're so used to losing that they can't even see when they're winning. They think they're being tricked when they're winning. You know? That's like those cold marriages where the flame long went out and the husband and wife don't show each other affection no more. And then one day the wife just decides to cook for the husband and, you know, be affectionate and give him some head and shit. And the whole time he's skeptical, like, damn, what's she got playing? Like, what's she trying to do to me? What's she trying to get out of me? Like, you're so used to losing that when something good happens to you, you're skeptical of it. You know, you think there's a catch to it because it's been so long since you experienced a real W that now that you're experiencing a W, you don't even know what that shit looks like or feels like. You know what I'm saying? And that's the condition of the American people, and that's been our condition for far too long. And this is why it's so hard for so many people to actually accept the fact that, hey, the people of the world can actually win this and defeat this control system, because not only has this control system been in power for generations, but they're very good at projecting power. They're very good at projecting themselves as being the all-powerful, like, who can challenge me? Yeah, well, Trump can, and he has, and he's been kicking y'all asses up and down the courts of public opinion for the last 10 years. Yeah, Trump is really gonna do some big things in Gaza. But I think his video, though, Red Lioness, about about Gaza and the reconstruction, I think that was a bit of an exaggeration, like a troll video. But he is gonna rebuild that place. And Israel's plan for demolishing Gaza was to build their Ben Gurion Canal so they can prop up the Rothschild financial system. But now that the Board of Peace has been established and Israel can't touch Gaza anymore, they can't build their canal no more. So now they're subject to the BRICS nations and the establishment of the quantum financial system. So this is an interesting time to be alive. You guys got to pay attention because shit's getting real in the field. Shit's getting real in the field, and We all are fortunate enough. Yeah, see, I'm all geared up because it's cold, man. We all are fortunate enough to have a front row seat to that shit. And I love it. So it's cold. I got to get out of here. We've been live for 2 hours. We got one donation so far. Yeah, one donation for the show. Damn. Damn, what is going on? I know y'all ain't that broke. I know y'all ain't that broke. This can't be. I gave y'all a triple header this week, man. I gave y'all 3 shows, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then if you count Sunday, that's 4 shows in a 7-day week. So I gave y'all the majority of my nights this week. And we barely get any support, man. It's a bit disappointing, but I understand, times is rough. Everybody's still recovering from the holidays and shit, so I get it. But, you know, if ever you can, whenever you can, always make sure to throw something in the pot, especially if you're supporting a YouTuber that actually makes sense of things, give you the facts, give you the truth, give you a better understanding of what's going on, because having that understanding creates peace of mind. So when you see the chaotic things start to be reported on the news and start to happen around you and shit, you understand what's actually going on and you don't fall victim to the hype and the panic and the chaos. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for being here. Don't forget, clip the show, share clips of the show if you want, screen record, whatever you want to do. Take screenshots of the slides as you watch. I don't do the copyright shit, so y'all can, have free reign with the content. You know what I'm saying? I'll flag you if you use my content to disparage me or lie on me, or take what I say out of context, like the mainstream media been doing to Trump. Yeah, I'll zap your ass for that. But if it's in support of getting the message out, I'm in support of that work. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for being here. Appreciate the love. I appreciate the support, and anybody that supports the show in between time before I go live again on Sunday, I will definitely shout you out on the next show. So don't feel bad. Don't feel left out. And don't be scared to support the show. If you only got $3 in your account, the fuck you going to buy with $3? Give me $1, man. Stop playing. All right. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Thank you guys for being here. See you on the next one. Citizen Man out. Oh shit, Colleen asked me a question. She says, "Where did you get your info?" Well, Colleen, I've been studying the political atmosphere since 2013, and I basically have been watching the patterns of everything, right? I look and see what's being said, then I look and see what's being done. So nowadays, when I see certain things being said, I can tell you exactly what's about to be done. I learned their language. And when you learn their language, when you read through their news sources and study the information that they put out publicly, it's very easy to decipher it and figure out what they actually mean. So it's not like there's one single master source where all this information comes from. It's more of a general understanding of a culmination of everything that's being put out. I hope that makes sense to you. That's the short answer. So see you guys on the next one. Citizen Man out.